Yo, yo, it's the Red Blue Podcast crew. Reviewing flicks, both old and new. Red and blue, not political. Nah, man, chill. It was Marvel versus DC till we lost that thrill. Don't stress the episode, don't ask the season. We double up franchises, don't ask for a reason. Mochi's got rules that nobody gets. His takes on movies, they're wild as it gets. He's got Superbald Mac and Gray by his side, trying to keep it sane while they're in for the ride. Mochi's measures are out of control, but in the end he's got the final role. Yeah, Red Blue Podcast, come check the scene. Movies old and new, know what I mean?
And we are live. Today we talk about Eat and 12 Monkeys, two very interesting movies. Thank you a lot for suggesting such movies, Gray. How are you today, Gray?
Yeah, I've been better. It's one of those weeks. Yeah, I'm here though. This will make the week better. I got to talk about two decent flicks this time. So, yeah. How about yourself, Multi? How you doing, sir?
Doing great, and thank you a lot for joining us. That's amazing. Times are hard sometimes. How are you, Superbald?
I'm doing all right. A bit tired though, but otherwise fine.
I feel you, man. I feel you 100%. So, I guess this shall be the perfect moment for this. So, Gray, why 12 Monkey and Eat?
Well, again, it was still part of that list of, give me 30 movies that don't suck, or that I thought you should have in your film education. Heat is kind of considered widely like one of the classic, I guess, action shootout movies. And my God, it's got one of the most classic kind of LA shootouts that really has been committed to screen. So I don't know. That's kind of why I wanted that one for you. You seem to praise some less than classic action movies. So yeah, what can I say? I wanted you to experience this one, and then we got to experience Looper not too long ago, and I think that one gets some credit when people are talking about time travel movies, but somehow 12 Monkeys seems to get kind of forgotten. It's usually not in the conversation, and man, it's kind of a fun one, and it also has Bruce Willis. It's kind of like Looper with less guns. I don't know. I really enjoy this one. So I wanted to get your opinion on it and expose you to some 90s movies that, kicked ass, even though they're from the ancient times that you wouldn't dare go near, Multi.
Yeah, these movies are old, man.
Oh,
This
so
old
old.
movies.
Dude.
Dude, it's the 90s. It's not that long ago. Come on.
I was
I
a
was
teenager.
very
I was
small.
a teenager when these came out, so dude, you're making me feel old.
I was very small back then. Anyway, I enjoy both. I think 12 Monkeys is a better movie, but I enjoyed Eat more. Anyway, let's get into it. I will ask Superbald, what did you think of Eat?
I had never seen the whole thing because it is a long movie. I do remember it being on cable a lot when I was a teenager. I had never seen the whole thing, so this is the first time I've seen the whole thing through. I do remember it at the video store because it was one of those longer movies. It's the one that came with 2 cassettes. So I think that's probably why I never rented it. But it's a fantastic movie. It still holds up, even though it's almost 30 years old at this point. Amazing cast: De Niro, Pacino, Val Kilmer, Natalie Portman. It was only her second movie, and so many so many small roles too, little cameos by a bunch of other actors. Tom Noonan, Hank Azaria, Danny Trejo, John Voight, Ashley Judd, Henry Rollins, William Fichtner, who played an asshole in this movie. He's great at playing assholes. a young Dennis Haysbert before he became the voice of what is it, Allstate Insurance. Tone Lock, Ted Levine. Yeah, great movie. Tom Sizemore, great in this movie. The late Tom Sizemore, he died, I think, last year. That guy could have had him. I mean, he was in a lot of great movies, but he could have had him such an amazing career if it hadn't been for the drugs. But yeah, I know that this is actually based on like real people, something that actually kind of happened in the 60s. I didn't read up on the whole thing, but I know that a lot of this is based on things that actually happened on real people, and a lot of the side characters as well are based on real people. John Voight's character is based on Eddie Bunker, who was a criminal who later became an author, and an actor. He was actually in Reservoir Dogs. He played Mr. Blue, and John Voight actually does kind of look like Eddie Bunker in this movie. And this is the first time, and I think the only time, that De Niro and Pacino appeared on screen together. They were both in Godfather Part 2, but they didn't have any scenes together. Yeah, even though this movie is about 3 hours long, it never really felt like it was dragging. I think the editing could have been maybe a little tighter in some places. A couple of things maybe could have been cut, but other than that, I didn't really felt like the movie was dragging on. The only real, I'd say, real issue I had with the movie is that De Niro's character and his girlfriend Edie, I had a hard time believing they would be so like devoted to each other after knowing they're each other for such little amount of time, especially when she found out that what he actually does for a living, and she was ready to leave her life and go to New Zealand with him. I had a hard time buying that. That was my only real gripe with the movie. Other than that, it's such a great film, great dialogue, superb performances. And as Gray was saying, one of the most memorable shootout scenes. This apparently even sort of inspired some real crimes that happened afterwards. And there was like, I think a few years after this, there was actually some major shootout that happened in LA where it was very similar to what happened in this movie, and miraculously nobody other than the shooters were killed. A lot of people were injured though. And apparently it even sort of indirectly inspired the Grand Theft Auto games. And there was a French criminal named Redouane Fed who actually met Michael Mann, the director, at a movie festival and said to him, "You were my technical advisor," because apparently this inspired some of these very like elaborate high tech heists. Yeah, a few other things that I've noticed, the trope of like the adversaries having like a begrudging respect for each other. That's kind of a trope, but I thought it fit well in this movie. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about it.
Perfect. Thank you very much for sharing. So I guess that's my turn, because I feel like if I ask Gray will be like, "What did you think?" before I let him speak.
That
So
is
I
my
will.
move.
Yeah. I start reading your mind, man. Sometimes, just sometimes. I enjoyed that movie a lot. And thank you for suggesting it. And I will get flamed for my only issue with that movie. And surprisingly enough, it's not really pacing. I thought I would be like, that movie is way too long, but no, I didn't see the time fly. However, my true issues, and my only one issue was characters were forgettable. Uh, I will get flamed for that. I feel it. Can feel it already. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. That was my only issue with this movie. I think that was a solid flick, and I understand why it's being liked by so many and why it inspired crimes. It's kind of sad, but that means you left some kind of impact, and that's interesting. I think the point of art itself is leaving impacts. Um, and as a side note, this 1995 movie looks far better than lots of more modern movie with smaller budgets. I think they did amazing. I'm sure the budget for that movie, because it's 30 years ago, is like a fraction of what big movies have today, and they still did wonders. The big action sequence everyone talked about, I liked it. I think that was my favorite part of the movie. Or that would be when one of the cop goes shoot the guy in his hotel room by the end of the movie. Uh, I mentioned that because I can't remember their names. These characters are forgettable. Um, oh, great as airs now. Nice.
Oh, nice.
So I gotta say, the movie was entertaining for like a 3 hour ish movie. I didn't get bored. And I think the music was really cool. The action and when people threaten each other, that was entertaining. It's like a true gangster movie. That's fun. We need more of that. Um, and all of the bank ice thing was kind of cool as well. I I feel like there's just so many cool things to say. I feel like the atmospheres of the places where scene art shot was cool. The bar had great music and felt like a character. I feel like the sets and the places are more memorable than the characters themselves. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. Um, the movie overall is just well made, and I'm sad I didn't see that thing before. Maybe it's too old. Maybe I'm too young. I don't know. Maybe it's both. Um, I don't have a lot more to say. Um, I maybe I will add this actually. The sound effects were really cool. Um, I think everything when it came to production was solid. The actors were solid despite characters being a bit forgettable. I think it's not the actor's fault. I don't know. Overall, solid movie. Highly recommend. And um, I will let Gray on because I don't have a lot more to say on that amazing movie.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah, sorry that I changed to having hair randomly through that. I was Googling and I forgot that I somehow made my different PNG files associated with numbers on here. So the second I type a number, it just changes who I am. But good times. So like Multi was saying that, like, whatever the budget was, if it was today, it would be worth like a fortune. You're kind of right on that. So it was a $60 million budget back in 1995, and apparently today that would be worth 124,000. So, or sorry, million. Excuse me. So more than double the budget. So yeah, that wouldn't be bad. That would be considered definitely a higher budget movie if you're in the hundred of millions today. But money just went further in '95. But off of this $60 million budget, they were able to gross 187 million, and it was actually the number 25 highest grossing of 95. I don't know. I guess I would have thought like nearly 200 million would be more than number 25, but I don't know. I guess I don't know the 90s box office that well. But yeah, so Multi, are you familiar with any of the Michael Mann's films? Do you know any of his
May-
films off the top of your head?
Maybe, maybe not. So sometimes I do happen to see movies, but I don't necessarily remember the names or the people involved. But maybe I've seen one of his movies. I don't
You've
like.
definitely seen one. So he directed Ferrari, and I think we had to watch that
Oh yeah,
for this.
yeah.
So that's my least favorite one, but he did like Public Enemies, Collateral, Ollie. The one that he did right before this is what a lot of people consider like his best one, The Last of the Mohicans. So it's kind of interesting that he went from something like that where I mean, it's still got some action in it, but it doesn't feel like it's exactly like Heat. And then I guess he was just off of the Mohicans, and then he abandoned this James Dean biopic that he was going to do, and instead he went all in on Heat. And man, it is kind of a legendary one. Sadly, it didn't really win any awards whatsoever. It was actually up against 12 Monkeys for a Saturn Award, and it lost, but it was just for a supporting actor for Val Kilmer. But yeah, he did not win that time. So yeah, it's a weird one. Like Superbald was saying, it's loosely based on some real events. So there are criminals that the characters are based off of, but the actual like heist is not the same one or anything like that. So it's kind of interesting. So he took a bunch of inspirational things from real life and then kind of made his own script on this. But Michael Mann is the writer and director of this. He kind of is on, I believe, all of his films. But yeah, that guy's got a real talent because I don't know. There's so many ways that this could fall into like the genre tropes of, you know, like an action shoot 'em up, cops, robbers one. But man, for it being such a big ensemble cast, there really is kind of an arc for almost every single character. It really is kind of a different way of doing this, where in the genres, and my biggest complaint with most of them today is there's like zero characterization. It's just, you know, this is the bad guy. This is his number two. Okay, that guy's dead. But in this, like you get to see all the bad guys, and you get to see what motivates them. Maybe Sizemore could have used a little bit more character arc, but still, you understand that he's all in on the team. But almost everybody else, you can kind of see their arc, why they would be doing what they're doing, why they would turn on each other, why they would be so committed to this. But man, I really dig what they ended up doing on this. And yeah, so Multi, you had mentioned that you like the way that this looks, and it I can't remember exactly what you said about the scope of it, but there are 0 sound stages used for this entire thing. There's 85 filming locations, and less than 10 had ever been used previously. So they really wanted this to be actually on location and then be something that people haven't seen before. And that's one of the reasons why it looks so unique and it is so different. But it is very inspiring. Like, I don't know if you've kind of juxtaposed this with Dark Knight, but it really inspired Nolan in a lot of ways. Like that one starts off with a bank heist as well, or a heist as well. And it is very similar, but the way that he wanted to do the scope of it, like if you look at the first Batman, it was a lot of kind of miniatures, but it wasn't like actual locations. He really wanted to kind of get in the vein of this one. So for Dark Knight, they really went on location and really tried to get the vastness, because what they really do, the cinematographer and I'm sure the director, they really use a lot of wide shots in this, and it kind of shows you the character's isolation, and then it just shows the vastness of the city and just how isolating all of that can be. And man, it really kind of sticks with you. Visually, there's just so much beauty going on in this film for it being, you know, about some dark subjects. But it's got a really fun kind of blue color grading that I don't know, it doesn't look like every modern film today, but you can also kind of see that influence in like The Dark Knight. It's really weird, but yeah, watching it after kind of hearing that comparison, it's like, oh yeah, I can really kind of see where Nolan was kind of borrowing from. I guess this is one of his favorite films.
And I'm hyped about rewatching these movies eventually. Now you just hyped me.
But yeah, he was really kind of taken by like the sense of scale that's kind of offered by like the wide shots, and man, they really are beautiful. So yeah, that is very inspiring. And then I do like that again, the characters, for it being a large ensemble cast, it really does give each character kind of some time to shine, even if Multi forgets them. Can I ask, was it every character in here is forgettable? Was it just because
I can't remember any of them? I just remember enjoying what was going on the screen, but none of these characters are memorable.
Do you remember Pacino's character?
No, but I remember the rat dying in the apartment. That was cool, but I can't remember the character himself. But him dying there was cool.
You also said by the cop when you said that scene, and it's kind of the opposite of that. So I don't know, man. So that's part of De Niro's arc. He has a chance to get out of there, but that revenge just kind of pulls him back in, and he can't just let this be. He can't let that guy get away with it, and it's to his own demise.
And there was a cool chase scene at the end by the airport. That was a cool chase scene. I liked it. They trade shoot and one of them die or both of them die. I can't remember, but that was cool.
Just one of them. But yeah, it is kind of interesting. And actually, they did film that at the LA airport, LAX. But they almost didn't get to because the Unabomber actually had a bomb threat at the airport. So it almost completely killed their shooting days, and they almost weren't able to do that. But yeah, it's really interesting because again, everything is on location for this. Yeah, and then in an early draft of the film, of the script for it, it had Hannah, who is one of the more boisterous characters. So it is the detective character, but Pacino's character was supposed to actually be a cokehead. So he was supposed to be really on coke in a lot of these scenes, and that's why you hear him just giving this 0 to 60 performance, and that you had a big ass and you wanted to get your head he's supposed to be all coked out. So that was what he was doing with his performance, even though it wasn't in the script. But yeah, you can kind of see that. It's kind of fun watching his choices when you see that. And then towards the end, it seems like maybe he doesn't quite have his supply on hand, and the character kind of seems to be coming down and a little bit more leveled. So I don't know. That's just kind of interesting. There's these fun little character things that kind of get added into there. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of different things. So not just visually is this impressive, but the audio for the gun sounds. Michael Mann didn't want it to just be kind of standard. He didn't want it to just be dubbed with the same gun sound effects that everyone kind of uses. So he actually had a whole bunch of mics strategically placed around the actual shootouts to really capture kind of the presence of those guns and the impact of them. And man, it really does feel different, the shootouts in this one. And along those same lines, he really wanted these guys to be competent with their guns. So they were all sent to a 3-month course with I can't remember exactly what the dude's name was, but yeah, he had this he was a British ex Special Air Service agent. Oh, Andy McNabb. Sorry, I had it written there. I just didn't look at it. But yeah, he's a technical weapons trainer and advisor. So he sent them through a boot camp. I know a few years ago, everyone was talking about, John Wick and how much training Keanu Reeves went through. But man, these guys kind of did the same thing so that they'd all be proficient, because they weren't just using a couple different guns here. It seems like almost every scene that had a gun had a different type of gun. This really is kind of like a gun nut's dream. They showcase so many different rifles and pistols as well. But man, actually along those same lines, Val Kilmer's reload is apparently super legendary. He was able to do it in the main shootout, the ultimate one. He's able to just swap magazines so fast that apparently the U.S. Marines actually use it as part of their training, and they show them how he's able to do it so fluidly, so quickly, and then just get back to shooting. And they actually have this challenge for him, are you as good as Hollywood in reloading? And then, they make them take that challenge, which is kind of awesome. But kind of along those same lines, the first guy who was actually offered that part was not Val Kilmer. So Michael Mann actually offered it to Keanu Reeves first, and he turned it down.
What?
Yeah, he was going to play Chris Sherilis, but he opted instead to play Hamlet in the Manitoba Theatre Center production of Hamlet. So yeah, he decided to do theater up in Canada as opposed to being this epic Val Kilmer part. So they actually then gave it to Val Kilmer, which he is kind of legendary in this one, and he was the only one to get any sort of award nomination from this. So yeah, good on Val Kilmer. And
that's interesting. Keanu Reeves earned even more respect for me. He goes for project he really wants
because he wasn't in a film.
No, it's because he goes for what he believes in it, and he goes where he feel like he wants something. It's
But
not
just
kind
think
of.
of what he could have done as John Wick if he had gone through this 3-month course first. Come on.
You're actually right. Good point.
But
Well,
yeah,
if he had done this, maybe he would have never done John Wick, because they would have been like, "Oh, and we can't
True.
get out of Keanu Reeves because he's already done so much of that."
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. It did give us this. But yeah, there's just so many kind of iconic things about this one. Uh just the hockey masks alone. Any time you see a heist and you see hockey masks, man, it takes me back to this one. And like Superbald was saying, it inspired a whole bunch of real life crime, which oh yeah. It's often that it is kind of weird and cyclical, and I guess that could take us into the next movie. But I guess real life crimes inspired this screenplay, which was then turned into a movie, which then inspired real life crimes. It's awesome. It's full circle. It's great. It's the circle of life. So I don't know. I really dig this one, and for it being 3 hours, just it really doesn't feel it to me. But there are some parts that kind of drag, and there are some characters that probably could be a little bit more fleshed out. Like I don't really know what's going on with the Tom Sizemore character, but he's a part of this group, and he's an integral part, and he's fully committed. But man, there's just so many kind of bit parts that come into this, and I just dig all the actors. Yeah, I don't have much else to say other than this one's fun. I really dig this one.
Thank you for suggesting that. Now that you have the mic, what would be your grade out of 10 for Eat?
There's so many parts of this that I really do like. I think I'd probably go like 7.5 out of 10. I just like the grayness of every character. You can see in other ones you would make it like some super cop who is all good, but in this one you really do see why Pacino is kind of despised by his wife. That he is choosing his job over his family, and that's leading to just devastating effects. I really dig that. It sticks with you. It's not just one of those action flicks that you forget.
Well, that
That being
coffee
said-
shop, that coffee shop scene is just iconic.
Yeah. So I don't know. I kind of want to give it a little bit more, but it's not one that I kind of keep going back to. It for me, it's one of those that sticks with you, but you don't have to view it more than once a decade or so.
Thank you for sharing. Superbald, what would be your grade out of 10 for Eat?
This is going to be an 8 out of 10 for me.
That's interesting. I will sound like the crazy one as usual. I think it's my character at that point. I will give Eat a 9.7 out of 10, near perfection. I adore that movie. Thank you for suggesting such movie. Great. Nice pick. One of your best pick out there. So Gray. 12 Monkeys. Why 12 Monkeys?
Why not? Why haven't you seen 12 Monkeys? Tell me that. I don't know, man. I got a soft spot in my heart for Terry Gilliam films. Have you seen any Terry Gilliam films that you're aware of, Multi?
No.
He's a very strange director. He used to be part of Monty Python. He was the animator who did all of it. He's the one who directed the Holy Grail one. But
I think
yeah.
didn't he also direct Life of Brian? I'm not sure about that one.
I don't know if he did. I know he did. Life of Brian, I think was now I'm forgetting his name, but the dude who played Arthur in Holy Grail.
Oh,
Graham
Chapman. Yeah, it could.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I was totally blanking on Chapman. But he's the guy responsible for like Time Bandits, Brazil. Have you seen Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Multi?
The name sounds familiar, but I didn't see it.
Well, I don't think you've seen any of his other ones because they're a little bit more obscure, but fair enough. If you like this film, you should check out some of his other ones because he's got a style that's kind of all to himself. it's a lot of weird movements of the camera, a lot of Dutch angles. So I'm sure you're aware, but in case you're not, Dutch angles are where the camera is just kind of slightly on an angle. It just gives you this uneasy feeling. Even if you don't notice it right away, like subconsciously you kind of do, that there's something off in this scene. That is kind of his style. That's kind of the feeling that you get from most of his films, is just a little bit uneasy and something's a little off. But man, does it kind of work for something like this. I guess this is kind of what I'm all about, is these. So I really like it if a film is somewhat ambiguous, and it can be interpreted in a bunch of different ways. But I also like it if it kind of touches on a few themes, and this one touches on a ton of them. It kind of touches on themes of like perception of reality, time, madness,
Crazy
dreams,
people.
death, reverb. Yeah. But that whole like death and rebirth thing, those seem to be themes that he uses a lot in his films. But yeah, I really dig this one. So this was actually written by David Peoples and Jeanette Peoples. You probably don't recognize the name, but I guarantee you've seen something that they have written. So the biggest one would be Blade Runner. They are the ones who actually kind of wrote that. And this is one of the only scripts, I think there's only 2 that Terry Gilliam has directed that he didn't write himself. But when he got this script, he was just like, wow, this is really intelligent. I dig this script. I want to make this. And then he made it in his way, which is just so weird. So amazing. But yeah. So this was nominated for 7 different Saturn Awards. It won 3 of them: the Best Sci-Fi, Best Supporting Actor for Brad Pitt, and then Best Costumes. And then Pitt also won Best Supporting Actor at the Golden Globes this year. So it's kind of interesting that out of these 2 films, this one is a little bit more award heavy. However, I don't hear anyone talking about 12 Monkeys. It did get a TV show kind of reboot a while back on the Sci-Fi Network, but it didn't make many waves.
That sounds terrible. The movie was good, but like the idea of making it a TV show.
Well, I'm glad you're open-minded towards it. Fair enough. There have been some good TV versions of movies, but yeah, as a generality, it's usually not as good. Usually, if you want to stretch an encapsulated story into like 12 hours, not going to be so great. But yeah. So this one is loosely based on the French short, I guess you'd call it a film. It's kind of an art project, but La Jetée from 1962. And are you familiar with that, Multi? No. Okay. I know this is an ancient flick, but
that's older than me. Hell, that's probably older than my parents.
62? Yeah, maybe. But fair enough. So it's this really weird art project. Well, I guess they call it a film. It has some moving pictures in it, but if you have like any film class, they will probably make you watch this. It's interesting. So it's a story of time travel. There is someone who gets sent back in time who witnesses their own death. It is very similar to this, but it's told in pictures. So it's still photography and a voiceover. And then there's a couple of scenes that actually have kind of moving pictures in it. But for the most part, it has this tale of somebody going back in time, kind of finding romance, told through pictures, which is really interesting. And if I remember right, it's all black and white as well. So, you know, that's like 4 strikes against it for Multi. But yeah, it's very loosely based on that. This adds so many different elements to it. It adds a lot of elements that I think went on to be staples in sci-fi and a lot of time travel movies, but it doesn't seem to be getting the recognition that I kind of feel like it deserves from there. But yeah, Gilliam had just abandoned an adaptation of A Tale of Two Cities, which I kind of want to hear what the hell his version of A Tale of Two Cities would have been, because I don't know, that would just be weird on top of weird. And he had just come off of kind of 2 heavily disputed pictures. He had done Baron von Munchausen, where that went super over budget. So studios were kind of mad at him and kind of worried about him. And then he had also done Brazil, which it he had this whole controversy with it where they kind of showed that film to well, I believe Fox had the rights to it internationally, so they didn't do anything with it, but Universal had the rights for the US version of it, and they didn't like the ending of it. So they basically wanted it to be a happy ending and really essentially made him reshoot the end and change it for a Hollywood ending, but he hated that fact. So he actually took out like full page ads against it, and I think he even sponsored like a critic screening of it to get a buzz going for his version of Brazil. And then that ended up getting a lot of positive from the critics, positivity. So Universal ended up caving and let him use his version, the ending to that. But it left a really bad taste in his mouth, and he basically said he would never work for Universal again. Well, Universal happened to own the rights to 12 Monkeys, and they approached him to make this film. So there were a few constraints that they gave him, like right off the bat. It was, we're not going to give you any more money. We're not going to give you any extra time. It has to be on budget, and it has to be during the actual time frame that you're given. There are no extensions on this. Munchausen was very, very... the budget blew up, and then it was nowhere near the time frame that it was supposed to be. So there were kind of some weird things going into this. And then the other thing is they wouldn't let him choose the actors that he wanted. They had to choose some very marketable actors. So he initially did not want Bruce Willis or Brad Pitt. Nobody knew who Brad Pitt was at this time. Oh, yeah. No, that was studio forcing it on him. So he wanted it to be, instead of Bruce Willis, it was supposed to be Nick Nolte. And then
Who the F is Nick Nolte?
He's an old actor. You wouldn't know him from anything. I don't think he's done anything since you wouldn't know him of anything since like 2015, which is where your knowledge goes back to. So don't worry about Nick Nolte. He's the guy that a lot of people confuse Robert Redford for, but you probably wouldn't know Redford either.
Yeah. But yeah, I gotta say one thing. Usually I side with artists. I don't give a crap about studios and such, but this time around the studio was right.
I don't know, man. Nick Nolte is awesome, and I would have loved to see kind of an interesting version of Nick Nolte. But instead of Brad Pitt, he wanted to have Jeff Bridges, which would have been really interesting. He had just done The Fisher King with Robin Williams and Jeff Bridges, and he thought the Bridges would be able to kind of pull off this interesting character, this layered character. But the studio was basically saying, no, you have to use Bruce Willis. And he caved on that, but he made a couple of rules. And for that, he like went through a bunch of different Bruce Willis movies and looked at any like tics or mannerisms that Bruce Willis usually did, and then made Bruce Willis agree he will not use any of those. This is not going to be John McClane. You can't do any of your things that you do from Die Hard. This is not going to be an action flick. You need to actually go through some transformation. You need to show some vulnerability, which he kind of hadn't done in the past. And it leaves his career open to do a bunch of different kind of fun films that I don't know if he would have done, because I think before that, one of his kind of weirdest ones was like Death Becomes Her. He had just done Pulp Fiction, but it's not like Butch shows that much vulnerability, like a little bit, but he plays a boxer. He's not he's not a sensitive type, where in this one, I don't know, he has a couple of moments, like when the radio gets turned on in the car. It kind of seems like he's a child at time. Like he's very childlike in the way that he kind of approaches that scene. I hadn't seen anything like that from him before, and that's really what Terry Gilliam was trying to get him to do. And man,
cool.
It is. I think it's one of my favorite Bruce Willis performances, if it's not my favorite. Just he goes to some weird places in this, and just the character's arc. Man, he does it beautifully. But it just goes from, is this guy? It just, there's a lot of ambiguity that is left in this, and I've heard a bunch of different interpretations of this film. But man, I think Bruce Willis is on screen like 90% of this film, and Yeah, I think it really could have gone a different way if he kind of did his classic Bruce Willis thing. He's doing something different in this one, and I think it really works for me. But yeah, he really wanted some different guys in this, and they kind of twisted his arm, and he got so lucky that they did because Brad Pitt was kind of nobody at this time. So he had done True Romance, where he plays Floyd, Dick's roommate, and he made a little bit of headway. And he was in like Cool World, which is this weird half animated one. He was in like Thelma and Louise, but he hadn't really broken through. However, he had 3 films that he'd already filmed at the time of signing up for this that hadn't been released yet. And that was Interview with the Vampire, Legends of the Fall, and Seven. And those films all landed while this was like still in production and post-production, and he just became like the biggest star in Hollywood. So
Seven is a
originally,
classic. People
all of
must see
those
that
are.
one.
Interview with the Vampire is a lot of people's favorite vampire movie, and Legends of the Fall is pretty up there in regards to. But yeah, I love Seven. It just got a pretty big. I think it was the 25th year. Really, hard to remember, but yeah, it just or I guess it would have been 30 years, wouldn't it? Because I think it's 95. Damn, time flies. But good times. But yeah, it just had kind of a re-release that was really kind of awesome. But when all those films kind of hit, just Brad Pitt was the biggest thing. So they kind of had to shift focus, and now they've got 2 of the biggest stars in Hollywood in this film, and it kind of hit at just the right time. If he had used the other 2 actors, Nick Nolte and Jeff Bridges, they're big actors, but they were not like the number one. Where Bruce Willis was still white hot on this. I think Die Hard with a Vengeance had just come out, and then he had quite a few other ones. I think Fifth Element was the next year. So he was still on top of his game at this point, and man, it just opened up some doors to where he could play a little bit more vulnerable of characters. But yeah, Gilliam almost quit this film numerous times, including like about the middle of filming. He had a horse riding accident and it was near fatal. He almost died. So they actually had to delay some of the production. And then he came back. He didn't want to come back, but then he was finally convinced to come back. And then there's a documentary that they were making on this where they wanted to kind of document the entire thing. So there's a lot of behind the scenes footage, but there is one scene that they had apparently filmed. They just talk about it in the documentary, but they don't actually show it. But everyone's kind of eating lunch, and then they just hear Terry Gilliam yell out, like, then find somebody else to direct it. And he just like storms off, and he couldn't be got out of his trailer for hours until somebody finally talked him down, and then they were able to kind of shoot the rest of that day. But he is a very demanding filmmaker. He has really high standards. They actually named the behind the scenes documentary because of that, and I'm forgetting the exact name, but it's like I'm totally gonna screw this up. It is something to do with a hamster. Basically, he wanted to get this shot, and it's the shot where Bruce Willis is injecting himself. He's naked. He's getting ready to go back in time. And it's panning, and eventually it shows this hamster in front of the camera, and it's supposed to run on the wheel. They ended up filming this shot almost all day. It was just hours upon hours because he couldn't get this hamster to just run on the wheel on cue where he needed it to. It's not called like the hamster effect, but it's something along those lines. Terry Gilliam likes throwing in elements that'll kind of throw off everybody, that it really needs to rely on everything working out perfectly. And it's not kind of on the actors where, with anybody else, if you have Bruce Willis naked, your attention is going to be, okay, did Bruce nail it? But instead, his entire focus was on this hamster, whether or not it would actually run on the wheel. And that seemed to be what would make or break this long shot. And man, he just liked throwing in these extra things that were kind of just for him, but they're little details that just, I think they really kind of make his films hold up, and it kind of puts it on a different level. And for something like this film where you're kind of questioning everything, you're questioning reality and what is actually being shown, like what is real, what is in this person's head. It really kind of works for me. But yeah, because of that, his vision for this whole film was going to start and stop with the kid. So he wanted it to open up on the kid's eyes, and he wanted it to end on the kid's eyes. So any part of the ending that you're thinking of that like you have a theory on, it just wouldn't be there. It's literally just once the kid sees the murder, that's the end of the film. And it really took him, he almost quit over it again. He wanted to have his ending, and he felt again like echoes of his last interaction with Universal where they wanted to force their ending on it. It wasn't the ending that he wanted. So he kept telling him the only way that he would do what they wanted was if they could do like a crane on top of a crane, and then it has to have like 50 cars in the actual shot. And then he gets, the up to the plane and then gets that actual shot on the plane. The only way that he would do it is if he kept adding these extra elements that just made it almost unfeasible and way too expensive to actually film. And they caved on like all of them. So we ended up getting this really interesting ending. And I think for me, the ending is what makes this hold up. I do think it would be way more jarring if it just started with a shot on the kid's eyes and then just ended there. Instead, what we get, that last little like exchange on the plane, that seems to be where everyone kind of has their own interpretation of what we're seeing. And I would love to hear your guys' kind of interpretation of, is this a happy ending? Is this, it's very interesting to me what they decided to do with this ending. So this is a second film, and it's very rare, but Terry Gilliam also didn't want to use any sound stages whatsoever in this film. So none of it is actually built on a soundstage. Instead, they went to nothing but like abandoned buildings. There was an abandoned power plant, I think an abandoned theater, a bunch of different buildings that were in various like states of decay and stuff. And it works on so many different levels. And then I just love the kind of retro apocalyptic future, whatever you want to call that. It feels like it's very steampunk before steampunk, and just it seems like it's a little bit ahead of its time. It's what a lot of things were trying to do. I guess you have Blade Runner that came out a little bit before this, but man, this is kind of different. It's dirtier. It's not as, I don't know, like neon, but it's this interesting mix of like nothing beyond the technical capabilities of 1996, which is, it's an interesting aesthetic for a film, but there's a lot of these kind of ideas that seem to have inspired a bunch of other kind of, I don't know what you want to call them, sci-fi classics, but it really doesn't seem to be getting the same accolades that a lot of these other ones do. I see like a lot of inspirations for a lot of these kind of classic, like any time travel one for sure, but it feels like there's even like some Matrix kind of influences and some Dark City ones in this kind of reality that leaves you questioning what is real. But yeah, the music in this one is interesting as hell, and it kind of reminds me a lot of Brazil in the weird way that he's kind of juxtaposing what you're seeing with this kind of, I don't know what you'd call that. Like, it's not exactly jaunty, but it doesn't match the tone of the actual film at all. It is somewhat jarring, but in this kind of kooky way. So that is my intention. Both him and now I can't remember the actual guy who did the score, but he basically twisted that guy's arm and is telling him he did not want the emotion to be told to the audience through the music, where he feels like a lot of movies do cheat that way. It's like, oh, okay, this is the sad part. I can tell because, you're playing the sad music here. So he made him do these kind of interesting scores that all kind of revolve around this Argentine tango. And man, it is an interesting score that you kind of don't really pay attention to, but if you're trying to, it is peculiar, but it kind of sticks with you. And I like it, but I can understand why a lot of people are kind of really turned off by the actual theme song to this. It's an interesting little tango. It's not what I would anticipate kind of a time travel extinction by disease movie would be based on. But yeah, it really evokes a lot of the I think the right feelings for a Terry Gilliam film. Just it is also a bit jarring and a bit unsettling, but it just kind of works for me. So I don't know. But I really like what they end up doing with the actual story in this. I think it works for me, the whole loop. And then the way that I interpret it, I'm sure is not the way that you guys are interpreting it. One of the things about this is there is kind of this this weird eye of the beholder thing that you're able to kind of put on these things on any aspect of the story, really. But it's weird. The original tagline for this was well, I'm gonna butcher it, but essentially it's all about saving the world, but for somebody saving the future, but for somebody who doesn't have one. I don't know. I'm not sure if the future is saved in this one, but I would be interested in your guys' interpretation of it. But
You are crazy to try to save a world that thinks you're crazy. No.
well, that's an interesting interpretation of it. I don't know. It's just kind of it's one of those. I'm not sure that the past can be changed. It does seem like there are some things that are locked in, but I don't know. The person on the plane, the shot that Universal kind of made them put in. I don't know. To me, I think that represents a positive ending, but I'd be interested in your guys' interpretation of that. But yeah, I think I've spoken too much. It's a fun flick. I like watching this one every time I get a chance, and I feel like I never watch it. So yeah, it was a fun escape this weekend.
Hell yeah. So I guess I will let Superbald go second on that one.
Yeah, I hadn't seen this movie in a very long time. Also, my friend Amanda said she might be listening in because she loves 12 Monkeys. So, hi, Amanda. And it's her birthday tomorrow, so happy birthday, Amanda. Yeah, it's great movie. I'm a big Terry Gilliam fan. I actually have not seen many of his movies, though. I'm really behind on that. Aside from 12 Monkeys, I've only seen Brazil, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and the Monty Python stuff that he did. I have not seen Time Bandits or Adventures of Baron Munchausen or any Jabberwocky or any of his other like more obscure films. But I love Brazil. It's one of my favorite movies, and you see a lot of elements of that in this movie. Sorry, I've also seen The Fisher King. But yeah, this movie, at least the scene set in the future, the aesthetic I find is very reminiscent of Brazil. That kind of like grimy steampunk type of environment. And as Gray was saying, like great camera work, the Dutch angles, the fisheye POV shots. Especially for the scene set in like the asylum, it's amazing camera work. And of course, great cast: Bruce Willis, Brad Pitt, Madeline Stowe, who was actually kind of a big actress in the time this was made. Haven't seen her in anything in a long time. Christopher Plummer, great as always. David Morse, Frank Gorshin himself, the original Riddler, exactly from the 1960s Batman. And he also played Commissioner Beale in Let That Be Your Last Battlefield in the original Star Trek. One of the scientists was also played by Simon Jones, who had a very small role in Brazil, but he played Arthur Dent in the original BBC miniseries of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Joseph McKenna, who I don't recognize him from anything else. I don't think I've seen him in anything else, but I just wrote down his name just because he has the best line in the movie. He's the pimp And I love that line where he goes, "I was attacked by a coked up whore and a fucking crazy dentist." um, yeah, and as you said, based on La Jetée, that experimental film, which I have not seen, I'm surprised because when I was in film school, one of our teachers loved showing us all kinds of weird old movies like that. I'm surprised we never saw that one. I was a bit surprised though to realize that this wasn't written by Terry Gilliam because it's certainly in his style. Um, but it was, as you said, written by David Peoples, who co-written by David Peoples, who also wrote Blade Runner. So it fits that aesthetic. As for the themes in this movie, there is the Cassandra complex, which is actually something Madeline Stowe's character was referring to when she was doing that presentation. Which is This is kind of an oversimplification of it, but it's the Cassandra complex is when you try to warn people about something, but they don't believe you. Um,
And it's to add more to this, I feel like people think he is crazy, therefore anything he will say is crazy word, and it kind of creates
exactly.
kind of
Whatever
distrust.
he says, they'll think is part of his delusions, and they won't believe anything he says. Um, as for the time travel, I find this is what they call a predestination paradox. It's that you essentially end up causing the thing that you are trying to prevent. Um, he may have Bruce Willis may well have been the cause of this because when he's in the asylum with Brad Pitt, he mentions a virus is going to wipe out all of humanity, and Brad Pitt's character is like, "Oh, that's a great idea," and then later on, that's what happens. His father's company ends up developing that virus. So I think that's what that is, a predestination paradox. Um, I think there's also themes though of determinism, meaning that you have no real free will. Everything you say and do and everything that happens in your life is just all predetermined. You have no real free will. Um, Bit of fatalism as well, as if you cannot change the bad things are going to happen, and there's nothing you can do to change it. Um, as for Madeline Stowe's character, there's a bit. I mean, this is a little different because of the science fiction elements, but I think there's a bit of Stockholm syndrome there, where like when Stockholm syndrome is when people who've been abducted start to sympathize with their captors. It's a little different here because she actually realizes that this dude is telling the truth. He's actually from the future, and he's trying to, there's a big plague that's going to wipe everybody out. So it's a little different, but and there's also
He knew about the kid in the barn.
and that too. He knew about the kid in the barn. Yeah, exactly. That's how she realizes that he's telling the truth. He's actually from the future. He knows what's going to happen. Also, what they call the Florence Nightingale effect is when caregivers fall in love with the people under their care. There's a bit of that too, I think. Yeah, this is a movie where, you can interpret it so many ways, and every time you watch it, maybe you'll notice something that you didn't notice before. Especially with Gilliam, because there's so many layers to the stuff that he does. Like you were mentioning that thing with the hamster. Like there's so many little things in different scenes that you might not pick up on a first viewing or even on a second or third viewing.
Yeah, there's so many references to time travel and to monkeys just hidden in almost every scene. Like
yeah,
the one cartoon that they're watching happens to be a time travel one. Like they're there if you want to take second looks, third looks. There's so much going on that you definitely don't get on the first view.
But they're not distracting. That's the thing. It's like it's this kind of thing that like it's fun if you get the reference, but it's not distracting. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Like I said, I'm a big Gilliam fan, and I want to see more of his movies that I've never had a chance to see.
That's amazing, and I'm with you on that. Now I will admit something. I enjoyed that movie a lot, but I don't know, or I should say, I don't think I got everything on the first watch, and I feel like it's worthy a rewatch one day. Eventually, I really want to see that movie again after watching it the first time. And I have no issue with that movie. And I don't see anyone else but Bruce Willis and um, Brad Pitt in the roles we had. And it's interesting. Um, I knew Bruce Willis mainly for Looper and the Die Hard franchise, and now I get to see him acting another way, and I think that's the most interesting part about that movie is how Bruce Willis feels different. He's not invincible anymore. He is just a human that everyone thinks is crazy, and he's not that crazy, but people think he is, and it's interesting. I kind of said it. The idea of the board enforcing the idea that Bruce Willis is crazy when Bruce is saying he's not. Uh, it makes you, the viewer, question if what's going on there is really happening. Is he crazy? And um, I think another really cool aspect to that movie is the conspiracy aspect, where um, he feels like he needs to warn people, but people don't really trust him because they think he's crazy. I think that's the most interesting part about that movie. And maybe that's just me misunderstanding the movie. I don't know. But I think Brad Pitt was hilarious. He was very interesting, and the hostage situation was kind of cool. And you brought up Stockholm syndrome and such. That was interesting, and maybe it's really happening in that movie where uh, the person that's taking hostage start caring about Bruce Willis, and it's interesting. I think it's a very fun sci-fi movie, and I feel like it's really 1995. What I mean by there is I don't think that movie would be made today, because it was a different era overall. I think it's a product of its time.
Yeah, definitely.
And the music was solid and the acting was solid. I think from start to finish that movie was really good. And unfortunately, I don't have a lot to say. I just think it's a really cool flick, and every scenes with Brad Pitt and Bruce Willis, they were fun. Uh, so again, I for once stand by the studio. Guys made the right call, and I don't know. I like Keanu Reeves, but I don't see Keanu Reeves in any of these roles in that movie. Um,
It
I,
wasn't
I
supposed to be Keanu in this one. He was supposed to be Val Kilmer in the other one. This was supposed to be Jeff Bridges. You would
oh
recognize him,
Mm.
but
okay.
still.
Still, like, whatever the actor, the director wanted, I don't know that guy, and
You've
that's
never seen
fine.
The Big Lebowski?
No, I did hear about it, but I didn't see it.
You don't
Oh,
know the dude?
he was in Iron Man, the first one.
Yeah, he
He
was
played.
Obadiah Stane.
Oh, now I know.
Mm, mhm.
Now you speak to me, and I understand now. It's a reference I got for
Mhm.
once. Um, so overall, 12 Monkey, solid flick. Thank you for recommending such product, and I'm surprised I didn't see that movie prior. And I think it's predestined, just like Superbald said. Um, they basically
Yes.
triggered the end of the world.
But is it okay? Fair enough. So it's predestined, but is it a happy ending? Did they get what was supposed to happen? Is it a positive future?
That's a part I probably didn't get.
To me, it's very ambiguous. I mean, it might be a happy ending in the sense that maybe the scientists excuse me, the scientists in the future now have the information they need to create a cure for the plague, and they can go back to the surface of the planet. But um,
But isn't that
if you
all
but
that they were supposed to
if
do?
you're just looking at it from the perspective of Bruce Willis and Madeline Stowe's character, no, it's not a happy ending.
For sure.
Mm.
It is fulfillment of, I don't know. I guess if you are saying destiny, it is what all of his dreams, they've all been about this moment that he experienced that, has been haunting him, and he has to experience that again. Um, so I dig the tagline that they ended up giving this one. It is "The future is history," or "They're coming." But the original tagline to this was "The future is in the hands of a man who has none," which sounds like it's just a weird, confusing way of saying that. Like, it's supposed to be, like, is in the hands of a man who has no future, but it sounds like it's in the hands of somebody who has no hands. So it is interesting, but what they ended up going with is the future is history, and I don't know. To me, it leaves it open. Like, if you hear what Bruce Willis's job in this was to do, was to identify where this is so that the scientists can come in, get the sample of it, and then go back to the future to create some sort of cure for it. I don't know. I could definitely see the idea that happens at the end. One of the doctors that is there every time he's being sent out is the one who's seated right next to the guy on the plane. This would have been 40 years before, because it's supposed to be 2035, and this would have been 1996. She doesn't look 40 years younger to me. It looks like it is that same person. So, and I've heard a whole bunch of people's interpretations, and a whole bunch of people say it's like either this or this. And it's like, I'm kind of interpreting that as something different than that. To me, this kind of seems like mission accomplished, but a lot of people are kind of putting into it that, no, this is actually a tale of power. And you don't understand, like, this ruling class, she's saying that she's an insurance agent because she's going to ensure that she is part of this ruling class, and that they want this to happen so that they can maintain power. It's like, that's not what I'm getting from it, but fair enough. I do see it as kind of an uplifting ending that, the entire mission was to find this virus and then be able to bring it back. To me, it looks like that's what's happening right here, but I could be wrong. Maybe I'm a little bit too optimistic on this one.
Well, I like your perspective, and on my next rewatch, I think I will consider that and try to figure out what went down at the end, because again, I don't think I understood everything, and I still enjoyed that product. It's a fun movie. Give it a watch, and I will ask you, Gray, what would be your grade out of 10?
For me, I think this is like my favorite Terry Gilliam film. If it's not, it's within like the top two. For me, I think this is a 9. I find something different every single time I'm kind of going through this one. Just, man, there's so much to get caught up on. Like, I don't think I talked about any of the performances except for Bruce Willis's, but Superbald mentioned most of them. But Brad Pitt, I think this might be my favorite Brad Pitt performance as well. Just, man, I guess Terry Gilliam had real reticence with hearing Pitt like kind of read his lines, so they actually had him. He ended up chucking himself into a psych ward, and he was working with this other guy to kind of, I can't remember which college it was, but to really get down the affectations. And man, he does. Like, he really exudes both the manic and kind of schizophrenic just traits, and it's very believable for me. And I just kind of pick up on little nuances and extra little things every single time. Just for me, this is a classic. I'd go 9 out of 10.
I feel you 100%, man. What about you, Superbald?
No, it's definitely a 9 for me as well. On a near perfect film.
And for me, it is a perfect movie. I gave a 10
And
out of 10.
sorry, not to cut you off, but this is also I would say is my second favorite, or maybe even my favorite Gilliam film out of the ones I've seen, because I was a big fan of Brazil, but I had not seen 12 Monkeys in a long time, and I've got a much bigger appreciation of it now. So it might even displace Brazil as my favorite Gilliam movie. Sorry to cut you off there.
All good. Well, I said it. I give this movie a 10 out of 10. I adore that movie. Congrats, monkeys. So, what do you have going on your end of the internet, Gray?
Not much. There should be some videos out soon. Other than that, The Thinkers every Thursday. Go check it out. If you happen to be watching this in the near future, our Think this time is on romance. So, yeah, if you want to get a, I don't know, worldly perspective on it, we've got people from like 4 different countries/continents that, get together and disagree about everything. So, yeah, we'll disagree about romance and, possibly, I think the second theme was childless existence. So, yeah, if that entertains you or piques your interest, come over to That Darn Kidda's channel every Thursday morning for The Thinkers. That's all I got going on. What about you, Multi? What do you have going on, sir?
Well, this week I plan on making a tier list of movies from 2024 and 2025 that I've covered on my other show, Mainstream Movies Reviews. Outside of that, gaming eventually one day. And next week we talk about Shang-Chi. Yeah, that movie exists. And hopefully Matt will be back. Otherwise, it sounds like maybe I will be the only one covering Brave New World. Outside of that, I do react stuff probably Thursday and maybe this weekend. We will see how things goes. I try to do a lot of content out there for this Herald channel I got. And in an hour, I will actually be a guest on Showmonger channel. I cannot wait to talk about Black Panther. Outside of that, I think there's not that much going on. What about you, Superbald?
Other than this podcast, nothing internet-wise.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for your time, guys. As usual, I think I had a blast. We get a
Same here.
really cool show. And hopefully next week Matt will be available. And this shall be the outro now. Have a good one, everyone.
Yeah, Red Blue Podcast. Come check the scene. Movies old and new. Know what I mean? The Red Blue Podcast. Come check the scene. Movies old and new. Know what I mean?